About halfway through that meeting, the hairs on my arms began to stand up in the back of my neck, and I was freaking out because the guy on stage was telling my life story, almost word for word. Sitting in a restaurant on Sunday afternoon after church with our daughter, God called my wife home right in front of me. But again, I began to have those feelings towards God, that I had some serious issues with God. This was not our plan. I was angry. I cried. I vented. I yelled. I cried.
On June 5th of 1995, I was awakened by a phone call. It was 4 a.m., and my father was calling to tell me that my brother had taken his own life. It was such a shock. I remember driving from Texas to Arkansas, weeping and mourning. It was a difficult time for my family as we grieved my brother's passing. Have you ever lost someone close to you? A parent, a sibling, a friend, or perhaps like our guest today, a spouse? How did you grieve that loss? Did you take time to process those feelings, or did you repress those feelings and push them inward? Did you feel lonely? Did you isolate? Did you talk about how you felt with someone else, or did you keep your feelings hidden? Did you ever get an answer to the one question that keeps eating at your soul? Why did this happen? Sometimes, if I'm not careful, the enemy can sneak into my life and make me feel alone in my sorrow. This is a lie from the enemy, but how do I face my grief and process it in a healthy way? These are questions that I want to ask my guest today as he finishes his life change story with us. This episode is part 2, and if you haven't listened to the first part of John's story, I want to encourage you to do so. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. Previously on the last episode,
I felt different. I felt like I didn't belong, like something was not right with me. I couldn't describe it. I didn't know how to talk about it. I just didn't feel normal, I guess. And I caught you at recess or in a bathroom or walking down the hallways. I'd kick the books out of your hand and then kick your books all the way down the hallway. And then I'd laugh at you. And it just became a way of life for me, that this is how I got rid of that anger, was I took it out on others. Well, that was my big plan. I was going to graduate high school, join the army, go to Vietnam, get high, and kill people. That was my plan. God had another plan. See, I had ruined 3 people's lives, 3 women's lives. And he brought this 4th woman into my life. Today I realized that it was God bringing 2 broken people together to begin healing. John became a husband for the 4th time, a father, really for the first time, and a grandfather. That we'd made a decision right up front that God was always going to be first in our lives. Our recovery would be second, and our family would be third. And that's the way we would live our lives.
and now the rest of John's story.
Like I said, I hadn't admitted then. I still haven't admitted that I had a problem, that there was an issue. And I still had all that anger and resentment. I was just fighting it on my own. I know God was helping me, but I was resisting the urge to escape, to use again. I knew there was a path that if I wanted to, I could do it real quick and easy, and I knew how. But I didn't want to go that direction. And this is where, I know God's hand was at work every moment of my life, because, like I said, she had 3 kids, 2 boys. The oldest boy was already married, out of the house. The second boy was out of the house. And the third was a 15-year-old girl who was into drugs, alcohol, and gangs. She had had her mother's house broke into twice so they could steal stuff to go buy drugs. So she was just like I was as a male, but she was female. When I met her, she was court ordered to go to drug court. and go to NA meetings. I had no idea what NA was, Narcotics Anonymous. I had never heard of it. I really didn't. So I was trying to build a relationship with her and show her that, I was going to be there for her, unlike her real father was or wasn't. So I said, I'll take you to these meetings. It was there at the third meeting. About halfway through that meeting, the hairs on my arms began to stand up in the back of my neck. And I was freaking out because the guy on stage was telling my life story almost word for word. And I was literally looking around the room trying to figure out who'd been following me for the last 39 years of my life and had told this guy everything. And now he was telling the whole audience about me. And it was, again, that moment of clarity. John, you're an addict. You have a problem. You're at home. And it was there. I mean, I can't really describe the feeling of the guilt and the shame that was just poof, gone. God said, it's mine. Now that you admitted you have that problem, I will take these things from you. And he did. And it was there I began working my program that I knew I needed to be in these meetings, that I had an issue and I needed to work through the problem. And she went on and finished her drug court and she went right back out using, but I continued to stay in the meetings. And I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. We got involved at my brother's church. It became our church. The pastor there, assistant pastor, was a licensed counselor for abuse. He just called it 12-step recovery class. We got involved in that. Within the year of us being involved in that, he suddenly began to come up with excuses for not being in class and had us leading it. And unbeknownst to us, he had seen something in us that we didn't see in ourselves. And within a year of that, we became the leaders of that class. He totally bowed out and turned it over to us. It's like, what are you doing? This is not who we are. And he says, yes, you are. You are both leaders.
So, John, you and your wife are
I,
taking over this 12-step program at your church. And so how long did that last? And tell me a little bit about, what happened during that time period.
we did it for about 10 years. And then my wife, Peggy, came to me out of the blue and said, God's calling us to leave the church. And after a few weeks, I finally came to the decision that, okay, if God's calling you, he's calling me. Wherever we decide to go to church, we're going to do it together. We're not going to go to separate churches. We bounced around to several different churches for about 3 years. We ended up, the last church was about 10 minutes from our house, called Ben Davis Christian Church. And we took our class there. We were doing it there. And I was working full time still with the phone company. And I ended up doing a job up in the Zionsville area at a church and a school. And it was called Traders Point Christian Church. I just felt God saying, that's where we need to be. So I came to her and I said, we need to go to Traders Point. And that's where we ended up. We attended about a year and we had a meeting with the elders and the pastors and we took our class to them. This is what we do. This is who we are. And they said, that's great. We really like that. What about this? And they handed us the 3-ring binder called Celebrate Recovery. They said, we've been praying for 3 years for somebody to lead this class. We launched in 2007 and we went for about 8 years. For some reason, to the day, I still don't understand why the church shut us down. They're told us that they were going to go in a different direction. Where we lived was about 25 minutes away from the church, because we'd get moved when we bought a house. We bought a house closer to the first church we were attending. We were only about 10 minutes away, so we stayed there, and we had launched 2 meetings within 10 minutes of that house, January of that year. So we just started to attend one of those meetings, and that became our new local meeting. Was uh, at Light and Life in Avon. Uh, our daughter had finally come around and truly began to work her program. Her mother and I got to baptize her, uh, which was awesome. And life was good. Life was good. God was good. Um, September 21st, 2018, we celebrated 23 years of marriage. Either one of us had ever accomplished anything like that. Uh, we truly began to look forward to retirement. She was already retired through disability. I was looking at, coming up on retirement, began to spend more time with grandkids, traveling. Um, October 1st, 2018, sitting in a restaurant on Sunday afternoon after church with our daughter, God called my wife home right in front of me. I watched life leave her eyes. She was sitting right next to me, and she made a funny noise. And I turned to her and I said, "Are you all right?" And I kind of grabbed her cheeks, and she was gone. Yeah, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't understand. She had a massive aneurysm, and she was gone. Uh, it was just almost unbelievable. But again, I began to have those feelings towards God, that I had some serious issues with God. This was not our plan. You know, uh, no matter how much I tried to justify it or understand it, or I wasn't even accepting that the responsibility was mine. That I had failed in some way that had caused this, and I died. My life for me was over. I withdrew from CR, withdrew from church. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to live. And again, God never left or never forsaken me, no matter how much anger and and I don't want to say hate, because it wasn't hate this time. It was just I couldn't understand. And uh, January of 2019, uh, we have what we call one of our adopted daughters. We have several women that we kind of adopted into our family over the years through love and other situations. Well, she had been married to a guy that was from India. They had four beautiful girls, and they were missionaries to India, and they were coming back for rest. And the youngest at that time was 7. And God used that 7-year-old every day. She would call Grandpa. Grandpa, you up? Grandpa, are you on the way to the gym yet? Grandpa, we're at the gym. Are you here yet? God knew that I could not say no to a 7-year-old. And I did. I got out of bed and I went to that gym. I hated it. I didn't want to be there, but I went. And, God began to crack in that hardened heart and let me know that there was life to live, that I could breathe, that I could live past this situation in my life. I got back involved in CR and church, and it wasn't easy, and I was still grieving. I still am grieving. And the hurt was there every day. It was just a struggle, but God just continued to work on me, continued to get me to do things. And probably the first thing that came up big in my life at that moment was February of 2019. We have a state rep retreat in Florida. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to deal with those feelings, because in our 23 years of marriage, beach was pretty much every vacation with Peggy. She loved the sand, the sun, and the beach. And we went every year someplace. And she loved Florida. She loved the retreat, getting together with the other state reps and hanging out. So God had worked on my heart that I knew I had to go down there and say goodbye and let her go at the beach. So I went. Well, I knew I couldn't go by myself, and I had walked out of the retreat. And we got a little patio area there, and there was this young lady there that I had met a couple times from Michigan. My name is Shirley, and I just asked her. I said, "Would you go to the beach with me and just walk? I don't want to be by myself." She said, "Sure." So we went to the beach, and I was angry. I cried. I vented. I yelled. I cried. And she just allowed me to do these things. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't try to tell me everything was going to be okay. She just allowed it to happen and allowed me to cry on her shoulder. And then we went back and really didn't speak anymore too much after that. Uh, Finished out the retreat and went home. And then next thing I know, we run into each other at the summit in July next year of 2019 in Tennessee. Well, I rode my motorcycle down, and I didn't know at the time, but she shows up on her motorcycle. And that's kind of nice. Well, we ended up being security at the same door. You know, God was working. He began to just crack open that heart and let me know that there was a chance for life and love in my life, that I could experience these things and it was okay, that I wasn't hurting anybody and I wasn't doing something that I shouldn't be doing. And, we struck up conversations and took a couple rides together, had lunch together a couple of times, and just getting to know each other. And then pretty soon the summit was almost over, and she goes, "Hey, I'm doing my testimony at Crown Point in a week. I'd like for you to ride up and hear it." Well, we'll see. I don't know. Well, I did, and it was a pretty awesome testimony. And when I got ready to leave, I walked by her, and I said, "Give me a call." So we began to just communicate back and forth, and uh, we ended up 2020 in Florida together at the retreat. And by then we had already been dating a little bit, and I surprised her. I'd finished my report, and we're set up in a U-shaped table, and she's sitting at the back, and I was sitting next to her. But I mean, I was up front talking, so I kind of start walking around everybody, and I'm still talking. I get right to her and I go down on one knee and I pop out the ring and I said, "Shirley, will you marry me?" And all I got out of her was, She finally said yes, but everybody was clapping and filming it. So it was awesome. Uh, but it just showed me there that, God has never left me. Nor does, you know, he promised he will never forsake us. No matter how much we withdraw or hurt inside, he is there with us, going through the same process with us.
What would you tell someone who's dealing with grief? What advice would you give them if they're in the middle of that grief? They've had a spouse that's passed away, or a child that has passed away, or someone that's close to them, and they're angry at God for allowing this to happen to them, or allowing this, for him taking this person. They're in the middle of that grief,
Yeah.
like you were in the middle of your grief. So what advice would you give to that person that's going through that right now?
Well, it's taken me a number of years, and like I said, I'm still grieving. I still every day I know I grieve for her, but what I've come to accept and to realize in my life, that I have to understand, at least, you know, God has a greater picture and a bigger picture than I do. I don't understand why, and I may never understand why, but He does, and that's what I have to accept. I don't necessarily have to. If I don't ever know why, it's okay, and I have to accept that.
Yeah.
even though, again, it's not what I wanted. It's not what we originally had planned for. But I know today she is not in pain. You know, I know today she's singing in his choir. She couldn't sing worth a lick here on earth. She couldn't carry a tune. Her or I, either one, were gifted at singing. But I know today she is singing in his choir. So I would say to the person grieving, you need to allow God that to work his greater picture. Sure, it's going to hurt and it's not going to be easy, but you need to know, they're with the master, and they are out of pain and in joy for eternity.
We don't have the full picture, do we? We don't see the big picture. No. I mean, you're talking about, you're on the other side of what has happened to you, and you can see how God used those things, where, how God maneuvered. But when you're in the middle of that, what is it? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And we have to remind ourselves that when we're in the middle of that, in the middle of our pain, that God is there and that he is going to see us through, and that, that there is going to be healing on the other side of that. You're evidence of that. So, John, if you've got one message, you meet somebody in an elevator and you've got about 60 seconds to say, this is my story, this is my message, this is what you want to leave with the listeners, what would that be?
That hope and change is possible. That if you believe and put your faith in the true one and only higher power, Jesus Christ, he will save you. Life is not going to be easy. That's what I always want to make people understand. Just because I say I'm a Christian, saying, "Oh, your life's easy." No, my life has not been easy, nor ever will be. But I know where my joy and my strength comes from, and it's there new every day.
John, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you've been dealing with grief in your life, perhaps you feel alone in your pain and you wonder if you could ever feel joy and peace again. Don't let the enemy lie to you. You are not alone, and Jesus Christ can bring healing and peace back into your life just like he did for John. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.